recently I realized that I have OCD, woohoo, at the ripe age of nearly Jesus's age. Realizing you have a mental health condition later in life can feel confusing. Coming to terms with having OCD has kind of been a headache and a challenge in the last month or so, couple months since I realized. When you realize you have something that you didn't realize you had before, it kind of colors everything retroactively. You understand, oh, I did that because I was going through this cycle, or this happened because of that. One of the first things I did when I realized, oh, these symptoms are all lining up with this, I contacted a therapist who specializes in OCD. OCD runs in my family, and I think because it runs in my family, I didn't relate my symptoms to the symptoms of family members. My OCD mostly presents more internalized, but then there are compulsions and there are specific triggers that seem to get it revved up more. So I think I have more relationship OCD, which means if I have an issue with someone, or I think I have an issue with someone, my brain gets activated and it tries to go into solution or fix-it mode, which usually makes the situation worse. Isn't that fun? So one of the things I'll do is I'll try to do more research, because I think, oh, more information means more information. I'll be able to solve the solution more easily. I'll try to seek reassurance. And if I don't get what I'm looking for in terms of that reassurance, then that kind of triggers it to keep going, and I try again in a way that usually is worse because my whole brain isn't on board. It's really great, as you can tell. It's interesting the different ways that OCD can manifest. I have relatives who have more OCD hoarding, or the cleanliness thing. Sometimes it's the counting thing, or heating things a certain amount of times. I don't have any usually numerical things like that. I do avoid touching doors, but I thought everyone does that, so I also didn't relate that to cleanliness OCD, but I probably do have a little bit of that. Some of the things that have helped so far has been exposure response therapy. That's what I'm mainly seeing my current therapist for. And I'll go into a video about that if you guys are interested. It's been really helpful so far. Fortunately, it doesn't work every time because you have to actually remember to do it. My therapist, she said how OCD is always trying to make you the bad person. If you really break down some of the OCD thoughts you have, there's often this thing around self-worth, around not being good enough, or not being kind of self-worth, self-goodness or badness kind of thing, which is a lot of fun to deal with. I like to think of it as an if-then thing. I'll notice my brain does a lot of if-thenning. So if I don't do this, then this is going to happen. Or if I do this, then this is going to happen. If then, if then, if then. And that kind of lends toward catastrophic thinking or rumination. So one of the things my therapist said as a counter to that, you can think of it like maybe, maybe not. Maybe that will happen, maybe it won't. And that doesn't mean it's a maybe, maybe not 50%. It could be 10% maybe, or 90% not, maybe not. So it's not equal whether or not something will happen. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. And maybe there's a greater likelihood it will, maybe there's a greater likelihood it won't. It's not like it has to happen. That's important to remember. Maybe, maybe not. One of the other things about OCD is sitting with the discomfort of things. One of my friends who has gone through OCD treatment effectively, she told me, she's like, Tess, honestly, with all the treatment I've done, it's really just sitting with being uncomfortable until you feel a little less uncomfortable. It's really just feeling uncomfortable a lot of the time. I'm like, that sounds awful, but also I already feel uncomfortable with the OCD. Obviously the compulsions to try to fix something or try to research more isn't helping. Anyways, it just feeds into it. So I think one of the things, if you suspect you have OCD, I do recommend seeing an OCD therapist who can talk out with you to see if you actually have it. And then one of the other things is pause and not do things. If you have a compulsion to do something because you think you're gonna feel better, maybe you will, but maybe you won't. It probably does feed it and make it worse. I realized that like even some of my creative habits are kind of compulsions. If I feel bad about something, or if I feel kind of zoned in on something, I'll come up with a video idea, or I'll start writing poetry, or I'll journal, or I'll do all these things I've compulsively to lend toward feeling more satisfied or full or sated, like emotionally sated, where I'm just like, yeah, it's fine. Now I have more information. I can understand. I can feel better. I can channel this energy into something creative, which will make me feel better about myself and just prove these not nice thoughts my brain is giving to me. The obsessive quality of OCD I recognize in some of my creative fields. So like there are certain themes with poetry where I'll obsessively go into them again and again and again, and I'll get a new poem each time on a similar topic. And I realized in my writing or in the poetry manuscripts I'm working on, and even like professors could see there was like an obsessive quality to what I was trying to get at on the page. I didn't relate it to OCD. I was just like, yeah, that's my creative focus. I'm just very like tuned in to this topic. And I'm not necessarily mad about that one. I think I've gotten some really interesting works because of that. And that's where like, even though this thing really sucks, I hope maybe you can find some elements of the OCD brain that maybe aren't the worst. It's not the most fun condition, but maybe it does help you in a way that's creative at times, and maybe you can give yourself a little more compassion and self-love as you work through dealing with this. One of the other things my therapist recommends is recognizing the OCD thoughts as like a different self and the self-self. If a cyclical thought is coming up, then acknowledging, okay, this is the OCD talking. This isn't actually me. This is the OCD. Hey, OCD. Like, I hear you, but I'm not gonna listen to you. I'm not gonna believe or cycle into what you're saying. So it takes a lot of mindfulness. I've gotten a little better at it, but I've really just begun treatment and I'm still kind of struggling with it. It's hard to have something for at least 20 years, not know that you have it, and then realize, oh, it's actually like my brain being wired differently, and now I have to figure out how to work with this wiring. And you know, anyone who's watched the maladaptive daydreaming videos or who is a maladaptive daydreamer, it seems like there's comorbidity with maladaptive daydreaming and OCD, ADHD, and PTSD. With OCD and maladaptive daydreaming, you can see how the obsessive kind of thought cycles or obsessive thinking could relate to each other. In ADHD, obviously maladaptive daydreaming, because there's that level of distraction or dissociation or hyperfocus. And PTSD, you know, dissociation, escapism, all these things kind of play in and feed into each other. One of the things my therapist said was that OCD doesn't necessarily have to have roots in trauma. I think basically all my obsessive cycles do have some kind of roots and some kind of memory. So I think for me it feels that much more real, because I'm like, oh, well, this happened before, so it's gonna happen again, so then I have to make sure it doesn't happen again, so I'll do this, and then it goes through the if then. But that doesn't necessarily prevent anything. Obsessive compulsive disorder can be about control, or is about control and management. It's the idea of having kind of more responsibility than you actually do, and more like desire or compulsion to manage things. So I think maybe one of the ways to think about like the OCD self is like a manager, like an overactive manager, where they're like picking apart every detail of whatever, and it's like, oh, well, those managers aren't usually that effective in the workplace, so you know what, brain, you don't have to be like that. I don't have to listen to the overactive manager. They can go back into their office and just hang out, and I'm gonna do my thing over here. For anyone with OCD, I'm really sorry. It really sucks. I knew it sucked before I realized I had it, and I realize even more so how much it sucks now that I realize, oh, that's what my brain is doing. Maybe some of the things that are kind of okay with realizing that I have it at this kind of later stage of my life, I think it gives me more compassion for loved ones who have it, and more understanding about about how they respond to me within our relationship. So that's kind of my spiel on figuring out I had OCD and kind of things that have so far helped. Let me know if you have any suggestions that have helped you with your OCD, if you have it, or if there's someone you know who does, who has something successful, in the comments below. As always, please like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. Really appreciate all the clicks on all the different things, and I hope y'all are doing well. Take care.